on Chabad.org.
Now we welcome our audience from around the world. Those watching on ChabadConejo.com, those watching on Chabad.org live, we welcome you. Those seeing it on tape delay, we welcome you too. So Sam Goldstein is in this locker room at the health club with his buddies, and the cell phone rings. He picks it up, and she gets right into it. Honey, it's me. Are you still at the club? Sam says yes. She says, well, I'm at the mall, and I found this beautiful leather coat. It's only $450. Can I buy it? Sam says, do you really like it? I love it. Then go ahead and buy it. Thanks, she says. And she says, I also stopped by the Mercedes dealership today, and the 2010 models, I saw one I really, really liked, and the salesman said we can get it for just $92,000. What do you say? Sam says, well, for that price, get all the options. Wow. She says, one more thing. The house we looked at last year that we really liked, it's back on the market today. Just $1.5 million. What do you say? Sam says, what? Offer 1.48. Not a penny more. She says, okay, thank you so much, honey. You're an angel. I love you. I love you too. Bye. The men in the locker room listening to this conversation. Wow. Sam is an angel. Unbelievable. Until Sam says, anyone know whose cell phone this is? The topic tonight, do you believe in angels? Or better titled, the angels in our lives. There is a strange episode related in the book of Daniel, whereby the prophet Daniel had this very intense vision of an awesome being with a fearsome presence, with a powerful voice. Daniel says, I saw this vision, but the people who were with me, his attendants, they didn't see it. And yet still, they were also overcome with tremendous fear and trepidation. In fact, they were trembling with such fear that they ran into hiding. So the obvious question on this short story in the book of Daniel is, if they didn't see the vision, why were they so frightened? What scared them? Why did they run for the hills? And the Talmud asks this question, and the Talmud answers that even though they didn't see it, their representative angels saw it. What does that mean? You see, every person has an angel that represents him or her in the heavenly world, a spiritual counterpart. And this is what we mean, by the way, with that word that we so often say, mazel tov. Mazel, what is a mazel? A person's mazel is that person's angel. That person's spiritual counterpart that watches over the individual. And this is why if you ever have a certain inexplicable fear, you don't know why, or a certain premonition about something, and you don't know where it came from, you don't know why you feel that way, or at times perhaps you have a certain intuition, and it turns out to be well-founded. It may just be that your mazel, your representative angel, saw something that you could not see and whispered it into your soul, so that your soul was getting a message that you, the physical consciousness of you, do not see, do not know from where it comes, but the spirit within you, the soul within you, is receiving this email message of something going on that you need to know about. And so you react in some type of manner without even being able to explain to yourself why you're acting in some type of way. We're taught in Ethics of Our Fathers, he who fulfills one mitzvah acquires for himself an advocate. The explanation? That for every single good deed we do, every good deed that we perform, every mitzvah that we act upon, we create an angel on our behalf. An angel is created from that goodness. A spiritual energy enters into this world based on what you have done, and it's your angel. And those angels, once created, are always there for us. Always there to protect us, to advocate for us, to plead our case before the Almighty. Whether it's during our physical lifetimes, as well as even after our soul returns to our Maker. Our deeds, thus, bring thousands, millions of these guardian angels into being on our behalf. So, folks, I ask you, what is your concept of angels? Have you ever seen an angel? And if you did he look like Michael Landon, Warren Beatty, or the Los Angeles Angel baseball players? What does an angel look like? Indeed, the Talmud tells us that on Friday night, 2 angels accompany each person as they return home from the synagogue. And when these angels enter the home and they find a table set for Shabbat, graced by the Shabbat candles, and the challah is on the table and the Kiddush cup is on the table, they bless the home and all of its inhabitants. It is the glow of this blessing that we gather around our Friday night Shabbat table, and what do we sing? Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem, what does that mean? Welcome. Welcome whom? Malachei Hashares, O ministering angels. We come on Friday night to our Shabbat table. What do? We welcome the angels that have come to our Shabbat table to join with us. In our prayers, we make constant references to angels. And in the Torah, we are filled with accounts of the roles that angels played in biblical events. Adam and Eve encountered an angel blocking the way, the gate, to the Garden of Eden after they were expelled. If you remember the story of Ishmael and his mother Hagar, they met an angel in the desert who showed them an oasis of water and saved their lives. If you remember the story of Abraham, Abraham met with 3 angels when he was sitting outside his tent in the heat of the day. Each of the 3 sent to carry out a unique mission. The very famous story of Jacob wrestling with an angel. Jacob prevailing in this wrestling with an angel, thus earning the name Yisrael, Israel. The very name we have of Israel comes from a story of Jacob and an angel. Stories of Joshua and Isaiah and Ezekiel and Daniel, each saw angels, encountered angels, and the scripture, the Torah, writes about these encounters. Even Bilam, a corrupt prophet, has an encounter with an angel. So the word malachim, angels, is a very real and central phenomenon in Judaism. Now, how do they appear? What do they look like? Sometimes they're completely invisible. They're there doing their thing, even though we can't see them. We don't see them. There is spiritual energy of an angel that's sent to this world to perform an act that we, with our physical eyes, don't see. Sometimes, the Torah tells us, they show up in physical human forms. They're undercover. But they look like a human being. Abraham saw 3 what he considered guests human beings, passerbys, on a very hot day. The Torah tells us they were angels, but Abraham saw them as three human beings. They look like you and me, but they're really angels in disguise. Sometimes they'll disclose their identity, revealing to the players in the story who they are, in fact, divine messengers. Sometimes they never identify themselves at all. For example, you're familiar with the story of Joseph. Joseph is one of the more famous stories in the Bible. It takes up a good part of the book of Genesis. Its story takes up more of the book of Genesis than any other story in the book of Genesis. And it's the story of Joseph and his brothers jealousy of him, and ultimately his brothers plotting against him, selling him as a slave. He ends up in Egypt, and he ends up becoming part of Pharaoh's household, becomes an advisor to Pharaoh because he can interpret dreams. And then there are dreams, and the children of Israel end up back in Egypt. And there's a whole story as the book of Genesis unfolds, which brings the Jewish family, the 12 tribes of Israel, together in the land of Egypt. But how does this story begin? There's an interesting start to this. Jacob is worried that the boys aren't home on time. He sent them with the sheep to pasture out, and they haven't returned. So he tells Joseph, go see what's taking your brothers so long. Very innocent. Joseph goes to where his father tells him the brothers went and doesn't see the brothers. They're not there. So, go home. Tell your father, I went there, they're not there. Here's the storyline in the Bible. Joseph is looking for his brothers and does not find them. Vayimtzoehu ish. But he bumps into this anonymous man. Does not define for us who this man is. Ish. He just happens to encounter this man. And this man says, you look like you're looking for something. Can I help? And Joseph says to this anonymous man, I'm looking for my brothers. And this anonymous man says, your brothers? Oh, they were here just before. And I happened to overhear them talking between themselves. And I happened to hear them say where they were going to go from here to this and this particular town. Joseph goes to that particular town. Sure enough, the brothers are there. They see him coming, and they say, let's do away with him. Here comes this dreamer, and the rest of the story you know. But just let's think for a moment. If this mysterious stranger would not have appeared in our story, if our story would have had a natural close to it, he listened to his father. He went to the town where his father told him to go to find the brothers. They weren't there, so he went home and he said, Dad, they weren't there, and he went to sleep. Had that happened, had this mysterious anonymous man not suddenly appeared and say, hey, you're looking for something. Let me tell you, I happen to overhear your brothers. Then Joseph would never have ended up in Egypt. Then Joseph would never have become viceroy to Egypt. Then the brothers would have never encountered Joseph in Egypt. Then the brothers would not have moved to Egypt. Then the entire story of the Exodus, which unfolds in the next book of the Bible, would have not happened. Then the story of Moses and the burning bush would have not happened. Then the story of the Exodus and the splitting of the sea and the plagues, I don't know if that happens. What about the story of Sinai? What about me and you being here right now? History unfolds from this one very simple encounter of Joseph and an anonymous man who says, they went that way. Who was this man? The Bible makes reference, Vayimtzoehu ish. He bumped into this man. How did this man know who his brothers were? How did this man happen to overhear exactly where they were going and being at the exact right place at the right time? Who was this stranger? I don't know. No idea. Was he a human being or was he an angel? I don't know. We are never told in the Bible who this person was. In fact, perhaps the purpose of this scene in the Torah is to teach us something about the quote-unquote random occurrences or chance meetings in our lives. That sometimes we meet angels in disguise. Angels who are there to help us, to guide us, to transform us, to bless us. And we don't necessarily realize or appreciate who they are at the time or why it is that they're there in our lives at that particular moment. April of 1944. The Nazis enter the once vibrant city of Munkach. They round up all the Jews, place them into ghettos. A month later, they're forced into boxcars en route to Auschwitz. Among those on board for that ill-fated journey was a 17-year-old boy named Shlomo Zalman. It was in the middle of the night when the train arrived at the most horrible place on earth. Hundreds of men, women, and children were herded off the train and told to stand on that infamous line. Young Shlomo Zalman had no clue as to where he was and why he was there. And the actions of that man standing at the head of the line, pointing sometimes to the left and sometimes to the right. What did that mean? He was too shell-shocked from the suffocating journey to know or even to care. The smell, the smoke, the shouts, the clubs, the boots. It was all too unreal. Suddenly from out of the darkness, a man, or rather a skeleton of a man, dressed in a striped uniform, emerged and came towards him. The man grabbed Shlomo Zalman by his arms and he whispered to him in Yiddish with a very heavy Polish accent, "In what year were you born?" Shlomo Zalman answered, "I was born in 1927. The man suddenly turned with an angry face. "No, you were not. Name. You were born in 1925. You remember that. 1925. What year were you born?" The scared boy said, 1925. Good. And with that, this elderly man disappeared back into the shadows of hell. The boy came to the front of the line. The man in the front of the line said, "In what year were you born?" He said, 1925. The man at the front of the line pointed to the right. It was only later that he discovered that 18 years old was the cutoff point that night between the labor camp and the gas chambers. All children under the age of 18 were executed that night. This boy, Shlomo Zalman, would survive Auschwitz. He would survive 2 other camps. He lives today in the San Fernando Valley. His name you may have heard, Saul Teichman. There are schools that bear his name. He's a wonderful philanthropist, a father and grandfather. He has helped build educational centers throughout the country and in Israel. He has built them and he supports them. Hardly a day goes by that Saul Teichman doesn't think about that 5-second encounter with this man online. A man who stepped forward from behind his own sorrow and his own misery to save him from certain death. Who was he? Was he a malach? Was he an angel? Was he an angel disguised as a human being? Or maybe he was something else. Maybe he was simply a human being disguised as an angel. A human being of flesh and blood playing the role of a divine agent of goodness to save another life. My friends, this is what I want to talk to you about tonight. The human being who transcends their own selves and come to us as angels. Elie Wiesel, famous author, spokesperson of conscience, once finished giving a lecture in a certain city when he was approached by one of the members of the audience. And the woman says, Mr. Wiesel, I'm sure you're asked this question all the time, and I know it's a long shot. But being that in your talk you say that you were in Buchenwald during a particular period of time that you mentioned, I was wondering if perhaps you might have known or met my father, who was also in that same concentration camp during the same time that you mentioned that you were there. And the woman mentions to Elie Wiesel the name of her father. And tears come to Elie Wiesel's eyes, and he gets all choked up. Did I know your father? Did I know your father? Do I remember your father? Not only were we in the same camp at the same time, we were in the same barracks. Let me tell you something about your father. When I was in Buchenwald, Elie Wiesel said I was at the end. I just wanted it over already. What could there possibly be left to live for? So like many, I contemplated suicide. The difference between me and the others were that I had gotten hold of some poison. I had in my hands the wherewithal to bring the suffering to an end, and I was determined to do so. And I still remember the day. I came into the bunk to lie down and to ingest my magic potion that would bring this suffering to an end. When I came into the bunk, your father was there. Do you know what he was doing? He was singing. He was singing a song that brought back memories of my childhood, hearing my Zaidi sing the same words. And so I asked him, I challenged him, how could you sing in a miserable place like this? And your father turned to me and he said, Elie, all I have is my song. And that's the only thing they cannot take away from me. These animals can take away our limbs, they can take away our bodies, but they cannot take away our song unless we let them. And then he went on singing in this beautiful verse. And I heard in this beautiful voice, I didn't hear just him. I heard the voices of angels singing. His song became my resistance, and I made it my own. I'm alive today because of your father's singing. The human beings who come to us as angels, they come to us when we need them most. Who sent them? Were they sent by God or were they sent by themselves? 1940. Hitler was tightening his net of evil and madness around Eastern Europe. Jews were running for their lives. Many were living in Lithuania, which was annexed at that time by the Soviet Union. And many thousands more came there from Poland to seek refuge. But people could see the writing on the wall. They knew it was only a matter of time before Lithuania would become a place of blood and destruction at the hands of the Nazis, Yamach Shemar. But where to run? No country was exactly opening their arms to Jewish refugees, saying, Jews, you're welcome here. One day someone discovered a loophole involving the Dutch and Soviet councils that could grant the Jews in Lithuania safe passage. And this quite elaborate plan, however, had one contingency to it. The refugees would need to have an official Japanese visa in hand. A visa from the Japanese consulate. The Japanese consulate in Lithuania was a one-man operation administered by a very humble, understated individual named Chiyun Sugihara. When the notion of issuing Japanese visas to the Jewish refugees was presented to this diplomat, he had a decision to make. He knew that his government would be adamantly opposed to any issuing of visas to Jewish refugees. So for him, this would mean going against his ministry. This would mean that his career would be essentially over. This would mean that he and his family would be disgraced, perhaps indicted, and possibly executed. That's the decision he faced. He and his wife looked at the throngs of refugees, men, women, and children, and suddenly they knew there was no choice at all. In the words of Chiyun Sugihara, I may have to disobey my government, but if I don't, I would be disobeying God. I chose God over my government. From July 31st to August 28th, 1940, Chiyun Sugihara sat for hours signing visas. Hour after hour, day after day, he wrote these visas with his own hands. Knowing that his days as the consulate were numbered, he didn't stop to eat. He hardly slept. His wife would feed him sandwiches as he continued to write. And when his hands would tire, she would massage his fingers and encourage him to go on. With each passing day, the lines of refugees in front of the Japanese consulate would get longer and longer, and Sugihara's writings would intensify. Eventually, his government got wind of his actions. They ordered him transferred to Berlin. But up to the very last minute, he didn't stop writing visas. Each visa represented a life, a human being. Even as his train was pulling out of the station, his body was arched out of the window of the train, still passing visas to Jewish refugees that followed him to the train station. The last action of Chiyun Sugihara as his train left the station was to take the actual stamp of the Japanese diplomat and toss it out the window so that a Jewish refugee can pick it up and attempt to forge additional visas. After receiving the visas, the refugees lost no time in getting on the train that took them all throughout Russia, with most of them continuing on to Kobe, Japan. They were allowed to stay in Japan for several months until they were sent to Shanghai, China. All 6,000 Polish Jews who were issued these visas survived in safety. This was the second largest number of Jews saved during World War II. In 1945, the Japanese government unceremoniously dismissed Chiyun Sugihara from diplomatic service for his defiant and disobedient actions. He and his entire family were sent into exile. He had to start his life all over again. He was without a job for years. For 2 decades, he was considered persona non grata in his native country. It was only in later years that this man would receive the recognition and the commendation he deserved. And finally, in 1985, still before his death, he was recognized as righteous among the nations by the Yad Vashem Martyr Remembrance Authority. One P.S. to this story. On August 15th of 1940, during that period of time, Chiun Sugihara issued visa number 1778 to a 17-year-old yeshiva boy who was separated from the rest of his family. His parents, his brother, and his sisters, whom he would never see again. I've had the occasion to speak to this man about what happened back then. How did you survive? How did you get out? And he said, for reasons that we don't understand to this day, God sent a malach, an angel, to rescue us, to snatch us from the approaching inferno of hate. This angel, in the form of a Japanese diplomat, saved our lives. You may have figured the bearer of visa number 1778, dated August 15th, 1940, is my father. I had the good fortune of finding this story and finding that Chiun Sugihara had a son, Hiroki Sugihara, who lived in San Francisco. I got in touch with Hiroki, told him who I was, and it was soon thereafter that Hiroki visited Agora Hills. And we had a very large gathering then at the Renaissance Hotel where the whole community came out to honor Hiroki, who remembered going through this period of time with his family and told us firsthand of what it was like during those very difficult years. And yet he said his father not once regretted the actions that he took. It is estimated that today there are over 50,000 descendants of Sugihara survivors living throughout the world today, all who owe their existence to a human being disguised as an angel. We all need to take a few moments to think about the angels in our lives. The angels in the lives of those we love, because we all have them. Who are the angels in your life? Think about it. Perhaps there was someone who stepped out from behind the shadows of his own world to rescue you, to heal you, to comfort you, to touch your soul. Perhaps a doctor who not only practiced medicine, but took your particular crisis into his heart and was there for you day and night, concerned and caring and attentive. A mensch or an angel. Maybe a nurse who tended to you or to a loved one as if it was her own blood. Perhaps a friend who wouldn't allow you to sink to that lowest point of despair when you were at wit's end and felt so hopeless. And there he was, or there she was, with love and with empathy, providing you with that shoulder that you so desperately needed at that moment to lean on. Perhaps someone who just happened to say or do exactly the right thing in the right place at the right time that changed your life. Who are the angels in your life? Maybe it was a teacher back in school who believed in you, who gave you that special attention which no other teacher gave you, or imparted you with some knowledge that has shaped your life. Perhaps your mother, whose unconditional love made you feel so significant and secure that no challenge would seem insurmountable. Or your father, whose patience, whose warmth, whose wisdom would help you make the right choices at these very difficult crossroads in life. We have to stop every once in a while and think, who are the angels in our lives? Think about them. Shlomo Carlebach once said that the truth about those Shabbos angels that I spoke about earlier tonight, he said they're not just there Friday night. The angels in your home, they're actually there all week long. It's just that Friday night is when you finally get a chance to stop and see them. Because he said the angels, the real angels in your life, are the ones sitting around your Shabbos table. It's your children, it's your spouse, it's your family, it's your loved ones. So let's think about angels. Let's think about the angels in our lives, and let us be thankful for the priceless gifts that these angels have given us and continue to give us each and every single day of our lives. At the same time, it behooves us to ask ourselves another question. For whom do you serve as an angel? Who are you an angel for? When a friend or a neighbor or a family member or even a complete stranger desperately needs a lifeline, are we ready to step out from behind our own shadows, from under the weight of our own burdens and anxieties, and throw them that lifeline? To be an angel to them, for them? How much of ourselves are we willing to give up to change the course of someone else's life for the better? Because I guarantee you, every single one of you here in this room and everyone listening throughout the world, every one of you has the ability to change the life of another human being for the better. If you desire to. If you want to be that angel for someone else, you can do it. Sometimes it's big things. Sometimes it's even very little things. A 5-minute phone call that you place to a friend that you know needs it in a bad way. Or 10 extra steps you take to walk across the room and put your arm around somebody who looks like they can use an angel at that moment. Or the commitment you make to volunteer. You know, we started a program in this community called the Sunshine Club, where we ask people to volunteer sometime, whether it's once a week or every other week, to visit a senior citizen. We'll team you up. We'll set you up with a local senior citizen. Give of your time. It will change you. It will change them. It will better the life of both of you and of the community you live in. Be an angel. Do you ever go to visit not just people you know that are in a hospital, but just people that are in a hospital? Do you ever just go to a senior home because you know what? There are some lonely people there? Be an angel. Yes, sometimes it takes the sacrifice of charity. Sometimes you're going to need to invest to be an angel. But that little extra that you give, that little extra that you give of yourselves, that's what life is really all about. And you never know. I've been involved in the people business long enough to know that you really never know just what a difference you could make when you take that little extra step to be an angel to others. Yeah, we live in a chaotic world. There is so much about our lives over which we have absolutely no control. But this we can control. This is in our hands. You could look at any mitzvah, any good deed you performed, any good deed that you did for another, and know you made a real difference, and no one can ever take that away from you. No bank can repossess it. You can't default on it. It's yours forever. And friends, do you know just how many favors you can do for other people when you're part of a community? When you're not just living somewhere for yourself, but you're actually part of a congregation, especially a dynamic and an interactive Jewish community. There's so many opportunities to be angels in the lives of others because you get to know the needs of others and you know that which they need and when they need it. So many opportunities to do mitzvot, to befriend another, to study together, to pray for someone else's family member, to be there for someone else in good times and in bad times. On Simchat Torah, a holiday of Simchat Torah, we take the Torahs out of the ark and we dance around the congregation celebrating this wonderful gift that God gave us. It's an extremely festive holiday. The children are so excited about it. We have flags and the children wave them and they dance and they sing songs. It's festive for everyone, for the entire family. Well, the celebration doesn't only go on the night of Simchat Torah, it continues the next day in the congregation as well. So this story goes back to the city of San Diego. 9-year-old boy is walking with his father on the way home from the Chabad synagogue on Montezuma Road, having just finished the dancing on Simchat Torah night. And the boy turns to his father on his way home and he asks with all sincerity, could we bring the Torah home tomorrow on the day of Simchat Torah? And the father says, no, I'm sorry, son, the Torah stays in the synagogue. We can't just bring it home. And the boy started to cry. And the father understood the crying of his son. Because his wife, this boy's mother, Chana Sarah, who loved Simchat Torah so much and loved the dancing at their synagogue so much, was home in bed, recovering from chemotherapy that she had been battling cancer now for many weeks. That year, holidays weren't the same in this boy's home. And he was sad to see his mother this way, and to see her in bed, and to see her in pain. And Simchat Torah was always her favorite holiday, and here he was in the synagogue with his father, and they were dancing, but the entire time this 9-year-old boy is thinking about his mother at home in bed. And so on his way home, he says to his father, can't we bring the Torah home tomorrow so that at least she could participate a little bit? And the father innocently says, the Torahs don't leave the synagogue. We can't just take it home with us. The next day, Chana Sarah, his mother, was sitting alone in the house on a recliner in the living room, trying to distract herself from the effects of the chemotherapy. She closes her eyes and she's imagining what must be going on in the synagogue. Her 9-year-old dancing with her 6-year-old. Maybe someone lifted her 6-year-old on their shoulders and they're dancing around. And she could imagine all the singing and all the clapping and the celebration. In her mind, she could actually hear the singing going on. It sounded so real. And suddenly she opened her eyes, and it was real. Because as she looks out the window of her house, she sees that the whole community, everyone, left the synagogue with the Torahs and the flags, making their way to her home. Because you see, the father who couldn't sleep all night because of this 9-year-old boy's request said to the rabbi when he came in, what am I supposed to answer my son? And he said, you answer your son, of course we'll do it. Not only will you do it, we'll all do it. We'll stop the services now here, and we'll all go and we will dance Simchat Torah in your home, so that your wife can participate, so that your 9-year-old and your 6-year-old can see their mommy enjoying the holiday. And so with their talesim on and with their flags and with all of the celebration, Simchat Torah that year moved from the Chabad house on Montezuma into Chana Sarah's house. The Torah was brought to her to kiss. And the 9-year-old boy looked at his mommy and was able to smile. And the words of her husband, they were not just congregants dancing that day. It was the dance and the singing of angels. There is a joy, there is a unity, there is a bond that exists in a community when we're there for one another. It's the simcha, it's the joy of love. It's the simcha, it's the joy of compassion. It's the joy of the mitzvah. A Hasidic master once put it this way. On Yom Kippur, we describe in our prayers how beautiful the songs of angels are. There are many prayers we recite on Yom Kippur about the prayers of the angels. If you pay attention next Yom Kippur, you will read some of the prayers. This angel says this, and this angel does this. All about the prayers of the celestial angels up above in heaven on Yom Kippur. And it is true that compared to the songs of angels, the prayers of us mortal man must sound pretty feeble. How could we compete? As a matter of fact, anyone here good in math? Follow me on this. It is written that there is this beautiful angel. This particular angel has 1,000 heads. Each head has 1,000 tongues. What are we up to? How many tongues we got? 1,000 tongues each head, 1,000 heads. Okay. I'm not finished yet. Each tongue has 1,000 voices. Each voice sings 1,000 melodies. So we got 1,000 melodies coming out of each voice, which we have 1,000 voices coming out of each tongue, and we have 1,000 tongues coming out of each head, and we have 1,000 heads coming out of this one angel. You talk about a symphony. The beauty and the harmony of this particular angel's song is supposed to be unbelievable, heavenly. But you know, the Hasidic master said, for all of its beauty, this angel, who can create the most beautiful symphony orchestra that the world can ever dream of, cannot give a morsel of bread to a hungry person. And that's the difference. The heavenly angels can look out for us, they can protect us, they can direct us, they can advocate for us, they can even influence us, but they cannot do the job for us. We have to make it happen in this world. You see, the Torah was not given in heaven, the Torah was given to us here on earth. The Torah was not given to spiritual angels. The Torah works for physical human beings on a physical earth who have the free choice to do or not to do what is asked of them. Only you can do it. Only you can decide to take a piece of your bread, a piece of your earning, and share it with someone else. Only you can feed a hungry person, the angel can't. Only you can help another person, the angel can't. Several years ago, on a dark night in the city of Hebron, 2 Israeli soldiers were out on foot patrol. Suddenly they heard a shot ring out. A single crack of a rifle. One soldier jumps and says, "What could that be? We have to find the source of the shot, see what it's all about." His friend says, "Relax, this is Hebron. There's shots ringing out all the time." The other soldier says, "No, we need to investigate. We need to find it. We're on patrol. If there was a shot, maybe someone was hurt. We have to find it." And he starts running through all the alleyways in Hebron looking from where this shot came. The other soldier saying, "Stop, enough already. Come on. Someone took their gun and shot it up in the air. What are we going to keep running and running and running?" But the first soldier couldn't sit comfortably with that. He had to find somehow the source, and he continued to run. There's something going on. There's something that we have to find. There's something that we have to look. And he starts running like a madman all throughout the streets of Hebron, through every alleyway to find what was the source of that gunshot. Until sure enough, at the end of an obscure dead end, he sees a fellow soldier lying on the ground with a wound in his chest, bleeding profusely. He lifts the man onto his shoulders and runs through the streets of Hebron yelling. He runs all the way until he reaches the patrol station. The wounded soldier was rushed to the hospital. He had lost a tremendous amount of blood, but they were able to save him in the nick of time. In fact, it was clear that had it been another minute or two, he would definitely not have made it. The next day, when the parents of the wounded soldier came to the hospital, they were given a full account of what had happened, and they were thankful beyond words for the miracle of their son's survival. So they asked to meet the young man who carried their bleeding son through the streets of Hebron. But no one seemed to know who he was or where he was. They asked this one and that one, nothing. It really bothered them. They wanted to thank him personally and properly, but nobody can tell them who the soldier was. As it happens, this couple, these parents, owned a mini market in Jerusalem. So they posted a sign on the bulletin board in their store saying that such and such an incident happened on such a night, this particular night in the city of Hebron. And if anybody reads this sign and has an idea, knows who was on patrol that night that could somehow lead us to the soldier that saved our son's life, we would like the opportunity to thank him personally. They just wrote the story, put it on the sign, and hoped that perhaps one day someone would read this and know something about it so that they can thank the individual that saved their son's life. Months go by. A young man walks into the store. He sees the bulletin board, approaches the owner and says, I know who that soldier was. In fact, I was with him that night. And you need to know that it was just one shot. And I, in fact, said, it's nothing. And he insisted, no, it has to be something. And something was driving him that night until he found your son. But there's a reason you don't know who he is. He has requested from the army to remain anonymous. He does not want the attention. And so I can't tell you his name. That's his request. So they said, please, if you can't give us his name, we're begging you, go and tell him all we want to do. We won't publicize it. We won't give it to the press. We just want to say thank you in person. He says, I'll see what I can do. Comes back a little later, and indeed his friend is with him. He introduces this soldier to the couple. They start crying uncontrollably. They embrace him. They kiss him. They can't let go of him. And just as the young man described, the young man is very embarrassed about this whole thing. He doesn't want the attention. And the couple keeps saying, we want to reward you. We want to pay back. And he's saying, no, I was just doing my job. I was just doing my job. And finally, when they let go of his neck, and he's about to leave the store, he turns back to this elderly couple and he says, I came here tonight to tell you a story. Many years ago, he said, there was a young couple that got married. They were having an extremely hard time of things. The man couldn't hold a job. They were extremely poor. Poverty was terrible. Every day was a struggle just to put food on the table. Every so often, this couple would go to a local grocery store. They would pick out the few items that they can afford. The people in the grocery store were so nice to them. And one time, the man says to this young couple, "Nu." You know what "nu" means? What's with a baby? You've been married already 2 years. "Nu." In Israel, you talk that way. So they looked innocently at this couple in the market store and they said, we don't have enough to live on for ourselves. How are we going to bring a child into this world? And the couple got very upset by this response. And they said, don't talk that way. Children are blessings. Every child is a blessing. You bring a child into this world, and that child will bring blessings into your lives. And we'll make a deal with you. We will supply the food for your household so long as you need it. As our gift, you bring a baby into the world. And this couple took them up on it. They had a baby. And that particular couple in the market kept their word. Until they found jobs and were able to support themselves, they received charity from this store. I came back to tell you that story because you're the couple of the marketplace and I'm the son that was born. I was born because of you. Now let's think about what happened that night in Hebron. Was it your son's guardian angel that sent a signal to me, don't rest, you owe them? Was it my guardian angel who said, don't you rest, you owe them? I don't know. But somehow, the guardian angels communicated. And what had to take place that night, me to repay a debt to you, took place that night. King Solomon writes in the book of Ecclesiastes, cast your bread onto the waters, for after many days you will find it. Good deeds have a way of coming back to you. One time or another, one form or another. The good you've done for someone else will always be there for you. They will always be there for your children. They will be there for your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren. That's just the nature of goodness. So how do we create angels in our lives? How do we create advocates in our lives? How do we create the spiritual energy that will be there for us? Very simple. We create angels by being angels. When we give, when we share, we create angels of compassion. When we impart faith, we create angels of strength. And when we laugh and we cheer up another human being, we create angels of laughter. And those angels will always be there to help us, to guide us, to protect us, and to advocate on our behalf. You've all heard the expression, seeing is believing. That if you can see something with your physical eyes, then you can believe it. Well, I submit to you today that the opposite is true. Believing is seeing. That when you can perceive things beyond that which you can see, hear, and touch with your physical eyes, ears, and hands, that is when you first really start to see. That is when you first begin to really have vision, to have clarity, to have security in this life. Do you ever wonder why we just finished Passover a few weeks ago? One of the highlights, especially for the children, Passover Seder night, besides for the Afikoman and the Manishtara, is Elijah's cup in the middle of the table. We put this big cup, we fill it up with wine, and we welcome Elijah into our homes. Now, Elijah's got a busy night that night because he visits every single home on the face of the earth that's having a Seder. He's there. He's got a lot of wine to drink. I am sure he's happy that now there's variety of kosher wines, because all he used to get was this heavy Malaga wine, but now wine. He gets all kinds, Cabernets and this and that. Elijah's in a good mood these days. But you ever wonder, there's this tradition that when we get to that part of the Passover Seder, we honor someone to go to the front door and open the door for Elijah to come in. You ever wonder, why do we have to open the door for him? If you believe, if you truly believe that Elijah is able to visit every single household that night, I think he could get into your house as well. I mean, think about it. If he could be in 10 million homes just in our country, if he can be in millions of homes throughout the world in different time zones, if he can be at every single one's home almost at the exact same time, don't you think he can find a way to get into the house without you opening the door? Now, I'm not going to say come through the chimney because someone else got that one idea. But he can get in. He doesn't need your key. He doesn't need you to open the lock. He's Elijah. Woo, right through. So why this charade of opening the door for Eliyahu Hanavi, for Elijah the prophet? I think the answer is, if you want to bring Elijah's message of God's love into your home, you have to get up and open the door. If you want to bring Elijah's message of God's love into your life, you have to let him in. If you really want to see angels, you have to know how to open your eyes and look for them. Don't just sit back and say, if there's going to be angels, let them come right before me right now. Get up from your chair, open your door, and look. And then you will see. The more spiritual we are, the more we truly get to see and experience the presence of angels in our lives. We just have to find the door. And we have to have the courage to open those doors. I'd like to conclude with one final story. There was a wealthy man who was a follower of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov was the founder of the Hasidic movement, a great mystic, a miracle worker. This particular wealthy man, who was a chassid, a follower of the Baal Shem Tov, had this fascination with Elijah, with Eliyahu, with the prophet Elijah. And he had heard rumors that there were certain spiritual exercises that one could do through which one could actually get to see Elijah with one's physical eyes. Not believe that he comes to your Seder table, but actually get eye contact. See the real thing. So he heard rumors that some people knew these spiritual exercises one can do to arrange an appointment. So he went to his Rebbe, the Baal Shem Tov, and he asked for the program. Rebbe, I want to see Elijah the prophet. Help me do it. The Baal Shem Tov pushed him off and said, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know about any program. I don't know about spiritual exercises. I don't know where you got these rumors from. Sorry, can't help you. But the man was persistent. He continued. Every time he saw the Baal Shem Tov, come on, I know you know. You just don't want to share it with me. Tell me, how do I get to see him? I will give an enormous sum to charity if you simply tell me how I get to see Elijah the prophet. Months go by, nothing doing. Finally, it's a few days before Passover. The Baal Shem Tov calls for this man. And he tells this man, I've decided to give you the program. I have decided I will allow you to see Elijah the prophet. There's one condition. You have to carry out my instructions exactly as I convey them to you. You do exactly what I tell you to do, no questions asked. And you'll get to see Elijah. The man agrees. Sure, Rebbe, no problem, I'll do exactly as you say. Okay, says the Baal Shem Tov. This is what you need to do. The first thing you need to do is you need to inform your family that you will not be with them this year for the first days of Passover. You're going to be leaving town. You then need to go and stock up on a lot of food. A lot of food. Enough for a nice amount of people for the first days of the holiday. I also want you to collect children's clothing. Buy some nice children's clothing. Take it with you as well. On the eve of Passover, on Erev Pesach, I want you to travel to the city of Minsk. On the outskirts of the town, right before the forest begins, there is this dilapidated home. I want you to find that house, and surely right before candle lighting time, I want you to knock on the door. I want you to invite yourself into that home for the holiday. Find a way to spend the holiday, the first days of Passover, in this particular home. The man heard the instructions. He informed the family that he wasn't going to be home, but he will be fulfilling his lifelong dream because he was going to meet Elijah. He had the address. He knew where Elijah would spend Passover. He couldn't tell anyone else. Secret. His family said, hey, if this is going to fulfill a lifelong dream, no problem. Go for it. So he fills the parcels with food and the clothing, everything he was told to do. He puts it on his wagon and he travels to Minsk on Erev Pesach, the eve of Passover. He goes exactly where the Baal Shem Tov tells him, and sure enough, there's a dilapidated home. He waits till right before candlelighting and he knocks on the door. The woman opens the door and he says, would you mind if I spend the holiday with you here? And she says, we would love nothing but to have guests for Passover, but we are very poor. We don't have any food for the Seder ourselves. He says, it's not a problem. I got food. I got a lot of food. And he brings in all the food, and sure enough, he sees very little furniture in the house. The children have torn clothing. Hey, I got gifts of clothing for the kids. He gives the kids clothing. The kids are celebrating. They're happy. There's meat. There's everything. There's fish. There's a whole Passover Seder with everything, all the trimmings. He's thinking to himself, I know what's going to happen now. When we get to the Seder, to the part of Elijah, he's walking in. I'm going to see him. He's all excited. He goes through all the rituals of the Seder. He comes to the part where it's going to be Elijah's going to enter. He asks, would I have the honor, can I have the honor of opening the door? He goes and he opens the door expecting to see the long white beard. He sees the same Elijah you and I saw this past Passover. Maybe Elijah is going to wait for everyone else to go to sleep. So he doesn't go to sleep that night because he's waiting for the private audience. Nothing doing. Maybe Elijah likes the second Seder better. Goes through the same thing, the second Seder, all the rituals. Can I open the door? Opens the door, nothing doing. Waits for them to go to sleep, nothing doing. The 2 days of Passover go by. He doesn't see Elijah. Elijah didn't come to visit him. He makes his way back home, goes right to the Baal Shem Tov, and he says, the program didn't work. It didn't happen. I didn't meet Elijah. Baal Shem Tov says, that's impossible. You followed everything I said. I followed everything. You followed all the instructions. It doesn't make sense. How could it be? You know what? Let's do it again. Let's do it again. Passover has the first days of Passover, and we have the last days of Passover. So, take down notes. You got to follow instructions, but you got to be exact. This time, more food, a lot more food. Now you know the sizes of the kids, a lot of clothing, enough to keep them going for the whole year. Some toys for the kids would be nice too. You also notice probably very little furniture. You can afford it. Buy some furniture. Bring them some furniture. You'll go to Minsk. But there's one more change. This time, before you knock on the door to invite yourself in, I want you to stop and listen to the conversation that's taking place inside the home. Okay. He goes home, he tells his wife and family, I'm not going to be here the second days either, but this time I'm really going to see him. Baal Shem Tov promised me I'm going to see Elijah. It's going to happen because there was some glitches in the program last time, but now we got the program all figured out. He goes shopping for furniture, for clothing, for toys, for food. He's coming with wagon loads. He goes Erev the second days, right before the holiday, and he remembers at the last minute, 1 second, I'm not allowed to knock on the door. I have to listen first to the conversation that's taking place inside. And he hears the children crying. The children are saying, Mommy, Mommy, we're hungry. We haven't eaten all day. We have no food. How will we celebrate the holiday? And he hears the mother answering, Children, children, do you remember when you were crying before the first Seder night that we had no food and you had no clothes for the holiday? What did I tell you then? I told you certainly Elijah would come to our home and he would bring us food and he would bring you clothing. And didn't he come? He spent the holiday with us. We had Elijah in our home for the first 2 days of Passover, exactly as I promised. Children, it's going to happen again. Elijah will come. He won't ignore your cries. The man heard this. He understood the message of the Baal Shem Tov, and he knocked on the door. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to see angels in your life, be an angel for someone else. You don't have to see Elijah. You need to be Elijah. Thank you very much.